Before Crisis on Infinite Earths, Marv Wolfman and George Perez ignited the comics industry in the 1980s with their revitalization of the 1970s team of sidekicks, the Teen Titans. Bringing back the old and adding a healthy dose of the new Teen Titans became the heavy-hitting title of the industry. Even Marvel's top seller, Uncanny X-Men, wanted a piece of that action, resulting in a classic intercompany crossover between the two teams. And if you like that kind of thing, there were two unofficial crossovers with Eclipse Comics' D and Agents, one in each of their titles. About 10 years ago, DC put out in hardcover a lost graphic novel set during the tail end of the team's heyday, when the title's popularity was already in decline. If you're looking to find the spirit of everything you remember from that original iconic series, you might want to consider the words of Thomas Wolfe. You can't go home again.
Critical Blast, where pop culture gets blasted.
So, the New Teen Titans Games, an original graphic novel by Marv Wolfman and George Perez, is one that I was eagerly excited to pick up. I really came into loving comic books, from first grade, and my story of how comic books have impacted my life is available on criticalblast.com in a little piece I wrote up called Everything I Ever Needed to Know I Learned from Reading Comics. But it was when the new Teen Titans got introduced that I really started to see some beautiful work. Before that, it was always just really fun adventures, great characters. I knew all the secret origins. I knew all the secret villains. And I was really into it as a geek that way. But it was when I saw Perez's artwork combined with the real layered storytelling that Marv Wolfman was bringing to the fore that I truly started appreciating comic books for being more than just floppies that were superhero stories. So this particular volume, it came out after the 2000s. It was started in 1988, and there weren't very many graphic novels being done at that time. The idea, the concept of the graphic novel was still fairly new. They had done Camelot 3000, and even that was a 12-issue maxi series. It was the first 12-issue series of something that was planned in large chapter form like that. So they were still playing around with the format, which is why there's a lot of artsy, stylized pages that you'll come across through the graphic novel here in Games. The story opens up in Antarctica, where a base has been destroyed, and Central Bureau of Intelligence Kingsley Faraday, there's play on words there, King Faraday, who's been an agent in DC for years going back. He's had some solo stories. He was a very not a nice guy in the Teen Titans history because he was a no-nonsense, all-business, governmental type who wanted to get the job done no matter what the cost, and he would put the Titans in situations that were sometimes untenable. He's investigating this slaughter in Antarctica, and written in blood on the walls now is the words, "Your move, Faraday." So he knows that there's somebody out there who knows who he is and is challenging him to step up. Well, he does know who this is. It's a person called the Games Master, and the way he explains it to the Titans is that the Games Master is somebody that CBI hired as a writer and an artist when they were looking to places like Hollywood to blue sky ideas about what terrorists might do to hurt the country. This is an actual thing. They do turn to Hollywood now and then and try to figure out, hey, what is something that we're not thinking of? What are your science fiction guys dreaming up, your fantasy guys dreaming up that are real things? I've had to do the same thing when I've tried to write chapters of The Destroyer, because I always have to come up with something for the bad guys to do, and I try to somehow make that original. Well, when he brings us to the Titans, he tells them that they have to find the Games Master and they have to kill him. this is not something that the Titans are going to allow. Certainly Nightwing is not going to let the Titans become an assassination arm for the CBI, and they turn Faraday down flat. What happens then is that the government starts putting the pressure on the Titans because most of them don't have secret identities. So, you find things where Changeling's foster father is undergoing intense IRS scrutiny. You find that, other family members of the Titans are starting to have their lives looked at very, very closely by all sorts of government agents, basically making their lives hell until they finally relent and say, okay, listen, we'll help you out, but we're not going to kill the guy. They even go so far as to attempt to put pressure on Bruce Wayne. And Dick Grayson shows up in the Batcave to let Batman know, hey, we need to talk. And you can see one of the edits that was done to this book to bring it up to speed, because you have Robin in the Batmobile trying to solve one of Batman's riddles about a crime puzzle, and he's wearing the short pants, and he jumps out, and Dick Grayson addresses him as Tim. Obviously this would have been Jason Todd at the time, so I don't know why they bothered renaming him. Tim Drake had not even been introduced into Titans history in 1988, so it was an interesting change to say the least there. What we end up finding out is that this Games Master has hired different villains to help isolate Manhattan and set it up for bombing and destruction. And these villains that have been hired are new characters, but they're also characters who have a set of powers specifically designed to negate the powers of the new Teen Titans. Now, how they manage to get those villains to be in the right place to face up against the specific Titan for whom they are a countermeasure, we'll just say that the Games Master had that sort of a strategy to pull that off. There's a lot going on in the writing, however, that I really didn't like. And it had to do with the characterization of the Titans themselves. You have Danny Chase, the telekinetic spy child of the CBI, being a member of the Titans here. And this, again, was not a character I was fond of when he was introduced. He came in after Jericho, who showed promise, but Jericho's character in this particular graphic novel really highlights his promiscuity. I mean, he's a deaf-mute pretty boy, and when they have to warn all the family members and close loved ones of the Titans that somebody may be coming after them, we literally see that voicemails are left for 7 different girls, all of whom have photos of them and Jericho in their bedroom in intimate and loving displays. He literally has a girl for every day of the week, and nobody seems to care about that. Everybody's just fine with it. Yeah, he gets around, cool. That just didn't work for me as a hero, so I'm sorry about that. That's just my own personal take on things. I guess you don't hate the player, hate the game, but I didn't like the player. So with this plan to isolate New York City and cut it off from the rest of the world and set off bombs, the Titans are doing their best not to become killers. However, one of the Titans' close associates does die in this graphic novel, which impacted the rest of the continuity if you were unaware that this happened. That would be Cyborg's girlfriend, Sarah Sims, the young lady who did all the work with the paraplegic children and helping them go through therapy to learn how to walk again, how to use their prosthetic limbs. She dies in an accident, which we find out later was unintentional. The Games Master did not want her to die, did not want anybody to die. He was really just trying to make it clear that there were potential attack tangents that the government was not prepared to deal with, and that they should listen to him. What we find out at the end of this, however, and big spoiler alert if you're not someone who's read the graphic novel that's been out for 10 years now, is that the games master was Faraday himself in what turned out to be some sort of a Fight Club moment. Faraday had snapped and was going through multiple personality disorder, where one of his personalities was pitted against his other personality, and New York City was in the crosshairs of it. So the Titans, of course, take him down, but the government steps in and says, no, you can't tell anybody what happened, and we will take care of Faraday. And if you do try to step in, then we will come down a lot harder on you than we did before, and you won't be able to get out of it this time. There were a lot of rewrites to this 1988 version to bring it up to the 2000s. I have a feeling that a lot of it might have been impacted by 9/11, which obviously had not happened in 1988 when this book was first being written. And I think the sensibilities of that permeated the rewritten version of the story. Insofar as there's a bit of 9/11 trutherism in here, where yes, the government is behind terrorist acts, and no, we're not going to tell you about them, we're going to blame them on somebody else. Overall, I was really dissatisfied with the graphic novel. It was very disjointed in places. You would think that one thing was happening, and then you would come back around later and find out another thing was happening entirely. That's not the stuff that was happening with the plot. That was stuff that was happening with the carry-through of the plot. For instance, you pretty much believed that Cyborg was going to kill a man, and that Dick Grayson believed that he was going to kill the man, and then you come back later and says, oh no, Dick really knew he wasn't going to kill the man, this was all a setup, which doesn't explain why Dick was so worried about it in the first place. Also at play here was the interaction between Danny Chase and Gar Logan, the Changeling. You know him now as Beast Boy. Overly antagonistic at the drop of a hat, and not so much that they just were like siblings that were fighting with each other, but for no reason dialogue would be introduced to create tension between them, and it was completely out of place. There was history brought up about Donna Troy having nightmares as a child. This is history that, as far as I know, has never been brought out in the series before, so why anybody else would know about it in her files is beyond me. This is also the era of Raven's white costume, which was supposed to show that she had gotten past her concerns about Trigon taking over her body again and turning her into a Princess of Darkness, which sort of totally sucked the reason for being out of her character. You'll notice in any Teen Titans version now she's back to wearing the dark. The white just didn't work on her, especially if you're going to call her Raven. Call her Dove, but we already had a Dove. Overall, I picked this up for $3, so for $3 I think I got my money's worth. At cover price, I do not believe I would have picked that up as a $25 price tag on that one. So yeah, if you can find this at someplace like Half Price Books or eBay, definitely go for that. The artwork is absolutely stunning and incredible. I always loved that original Nightwing costume that George Perez designed up. Not so thrilled with the Troya costume that came out. I always liked the Wonder Girl look. Always wish they'd have kept that instead of having to diverge paths there and become somebody else. But if you can get it cheap, then get it and enjoy it for what it looks like and what it is.